It's Sunday night and time for a look at the week ahead. This year marking 10 years since Hurricane Katrina. The president will go to New Orleans on Thursday, marking the anniversary of that monster storm that devastated the Gulf Coast. It was the most damaging and costly hurricane in U.S. history. Nearly 2,000 people losing their lives, thousands more left homeless. By some estimates, Katrina causing more than $250 billion worth of damage. Let's take a look back at what happened.
August 2005. Katrina is just one of many tropical storms that hit Louisiana every summer. Only this time it's a maximum strength, Category 5 hurricane.
We knew we had potentially a really bad storm on our hands. So Saturday night, 24 hours before landfall, the mayor went on television and told the city, leave. And if you can't leave, we're going to open up the Superdome as the refuge of last resort.
When you talk about the Superdome, with no electricity, with no plumbing, with no restroom facilities, with 30,000 people in that facility trying to just survive. The convention center, the same scenario. No food, no water, no restroom facilities, no air conditioning. And we're talking about during the summer months where the temperature exceeded 98 to 100 degrees.
It's the smell of dead bodies inside. It's the smell of feces and urine. It's just terrible. It's an awful situation to have to live in. And they've been making promises to us that they were going to move us, and we've been believing in it. And people just really been getting frustrated at this point.
On day 4, the government finally sends help to the city.
The storm also costly politically. Former President George W. Bush saying this photo was a huge mistake. It shows him flying over Katrina in Air Force One. It has become the yardstick of presidential responses ever since. Another image that will live on in the minds of Americans for quite some time. American citizens being described as refugees as they were forced to take shelter inside the Superdome. There were descriptions of dead bodies and raw sewage. And then there is this. 2 photos that tell it all. This elderly woman in a wheelchair who died waiting for help at the New Orleans Convention Center, and stranded Americans spelling out the words help, waving the American flag. David Shand is a retired lieutenant commander from the U.S. Navy, and Lieutenant Matt Utko is a pilot for the U.S. Coast Guard, both of them flying those rescue missions in the days after Hurricane Katrina. Mr. Shand, I'll begin with you. It has been 10 years. Do you still see these images, these pictures of people waiting for help in New Orleans underwater?
Oh, I do. I mean, I think about it all the time. Just the emotions that we're going through that day. So many people in trouble, and just the utter destruction all the way along the coast from Pensacola all the way out to Louisiana. I see it every day. I think about it all the time.
Mr. Utko, then I'll ask you this question. How do you feel looking back 10 years later and realizing that these are the images? This is the way Katrina looks now, and some say that some has changed, but not enough.
I mean, what we saw was pretty harrowing. We're trained to do that. We were both 9-year veterans of the Navy at the time, but I don't think anything can prepare you to see that kind of destruction. I don't think anyone was prepared to see the level of destruction and human suffering that we saw. Just to be a part of it, to help in even a small way, is a blessing to give relief.
I'll ask you both the same question. Katrina became a political hot potato. 10 years later, 10 full years, do we know the real story now that all of the agencies have been vetted and what could and could not be said has been cleared through Washington? Do we really know 10 years later what happened?
I could tell you. I mean, I'm a current pilot in the Coast Guard, and I don't think anyone was prepared for that, but to look at the response then and the response today, I mean, we work with partners on a regular basis from other agencies, and I think we're a lot more prepared for what could happen. But I don't think anyone is prepared for the magnitude of the storm. Being my major is meteorology, and this thing turned into Category 5 before slamming into the coast. So I don't think anyone was prepared. I think looking at the response then as compared to the preparedness level now is night and day. We did what we could back then. All agencies responded to the best of their ability, but it was just it's unprecedented, the scope of this.
Mr. Shand, 10 years later, do we have the full story? Do we know what happened?
I think dealing with something of this magnitude, I don't think anybody was prepared for that level of a disaster. I think we've learned what we're going to learn, and the response and the communication between the agencies that have increased so much since then, I think is the big benefit, if it can be described that way. But have we learned what caused it and why the delay was as slow as some say it was? I don't know that we ever will fully.
Mr. Utko, we see that image of you flying over. We know it's you because we can read your name on the back of your helmet. But I'm curious, you saved so many people. Have you heard from any of the survivors? And if so, what did they tell you?
I haven't heard directly from any of the survivors, but for a couple of our rescue missions, specifically the first day, we dropped people off on the I-10 interstate in front of Lakefront Airport, frankly, because that was the only high ground that was above water. It was a pretty old, loud helicopter, and we had people come up and shake our hands. So, I mean, we don't do it for any medals, for any recognition, but that kind of satisfaction when you look in people's eyes, frankly, I would not expect them to be able to find me, and I couldn't find them, but being able to drop them off on dry ground after their harrowing adventure, that was rewarding, and that was a thankful, that's the kind of thankfulness that I like.
And also, correct me if I'm wrong, but one of the people that you rescued suffered a heart attack, right?
Yes, sir. On our second rescue mission, we were asked if we could hoist 20 people from a flooded school. And this was day 5, so the rescue coordination was pretty in full swing then. It was night and day from the first day to the 5th day. There was just command and control. There were multi-agencies. But we still had a big helicopter. We flew what's called the H-3 Sea King. They're no longer flying in the Navy service, but they were big helicopters, carry a lot of people. Hoisted 20 people from a school, and while we were going to the New Orleans International Airport, my rescue swimmer said one of the guys is going into cardiac arrest, and I radioed ahead to the tower. They gave us permission to land in front of a line of probably about 10 helicopters, and we landed basically right between a couple of the gates and had the awaiting paramedics come take him away. I can't tell you if he survived or not, but the response from the EMS teams on the ground was fantastic, and if there was any chance of him surviving, it was because we got priority handling, and they were there when we landed.
Mr. Shand, we pay so much attention to New Orleans, especially when we saw those images, as we mentioned in the beginning, that elderly woman in the wheelchair who died waiting for rescuers to reach her. But I was struck by comments from both of you about the rest of the Gulf Coast. You said there was no one left to rescue and that houses were ripped from their foundations and gone.
Right. I mean, once you, flying west from Pensacola, once you passed about Pascagoula, Mississippi, there wasn't even debris left. It was just the foundation of where a house used to be. And there was just nobody there, and it was just for miles and miles, and just the utter destruction. Once you got closer to Keesler and Biloxi, you would start seeing debris and houses that have been moved off their foundation and destroyed. And it just continued all the way on into New Orleans, just total destruction everywhere you looked.
Also, Mr. Shand, both of you pointing out no electricity, even for the Coast Guard, and that all of you were operating off of paper.
Well, I mean, H-3 is a pretty old aircraft, so we had a very rudimentary computer GPS system on board, so everything we did was paper anyway, so that really wasn't too out of the norm for us.
Mr. Utko, take us into the belly of the beast. I was struck by the fact that you ran out of jet fuel. You were running out of jet fuel, and as you were heading back to base, you were flying over people who needed help, but you couldn't stop. What did that do to your gut?
Who are you asking that
Mr.
question?
Utko, yes, you, Matt.
It was pretty tough. We actually, the comment about the paper, the Coast Guard was doing the best they could. No electricity. I mean, we do everything on computers. No electricity. So everything was manifested on a grease board and paper, the amount of the survivors we saved and where you took them. So it was basically back in the Stone Age. But flying back home at night, because we had permission to do the rescues until nighttime, because we weren't equipped with night vision goggles or anything like that in the H3. But it was tough to see, because there's probably 1,000 different points of flashlights when we were flying home in the pitch black, and those were people stuck on roofs, stuck in courtyards, and it was difficult to see. I mean, we talked with the crew the next day, and I don't consider myself a tough guy in any means, but I fly with a couple rescue swimmers, and everyone felt it. It was difficult that there were people that were left on the roof stranded, so it was hard to see.
Let me ask you this before we go. Is there a time, has there been a day, and Mr. Utko, I heard that emotion in your voice, has there been a day over the last 10 years that you didn't think about what happened that day, that week, in those months that followed?
It's a complicated question. You can see on my wall, I have some of the pictures. I'm proud of what we did. It hurts to know that there were so many people suffering. It also feels good to be able to do the business that you were trained to do to help relief. I currently fly on the Coast Guard, so if I seem tired, I was up at 4:30 yesterday on a SAR launch. So I'm blessed to do it. But when I think about it, I think about how much better prepared we are as armed services of the nation to deal with something like this, a catastrophic event. But yeah, it still hurts. I mean, I see the faces. I mean, we're hovering at 50 feet, no matter how big our helicopter is. But you're looking at the faces of people that you can't rescue, and it's tough sometimes.
Mr. Shand, 10 years later, is there a day that you don't think about Katrina?
No, it pretty much is an everyday thought for me. I mean, I have a picture hanging in my office of me standing in front of the H3, and every time I see that picture, I think about flying in Pensacola, which immediately brings me back to flying in Hurricane Katrina, the people we could help, the people that we couldn't, and just the total devastation and all the people there that needed help so desperately.
Captain David Shand, U.S. Navy retired, and Lieutenant Matt Utko, pilot for the Coast Guard, who worked last night till 4 in the morning. Thank you both for joining us.
Thank you for having me. Nice talking to you, Dave, too.